YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, back on Total War Rome 2. And this time it's going to be a Galatia versus Tylis battle, which I like. This is not your everyday faction matchup, and I like both of these factions, actually. Some people think Galatia is bad because of their roster selection. I actually think their roster is pretty decent for a Gallic tribe. In fact, they're probably one of my favorite Gallic factions, mainly just because of these Galatian Raiders. These are my favorite Javelin Cav in the game, except for Numidian Nobles. Numidian Nobles are fantastic. And I also like Numidian, just standard Numidian Cav because of the 41 Javelin damage. It's pretty useful too, sometimes, not all the time. In any case, yeah, I'm going to use these Galatian Raiders to come up here. This map is Gadira, and it's got this little ridge line here that one player has to start behind, and they have to choose whether they should rush up it and capture that position, or maybe try and come around it. So I rush up to get a view of my opponent's army, and all I can see is a few infantry units and then some spearmen coming up here, and then I start to see more of his army here with tribal warriors, and he's got a fair number of spear warriors up front. I end up seeing one Celtic slinger, but let's cover my army. 4 Galatian Raiders, I believe I have 5 Galatian Legionaries, and my general is in a Galatian Nobleman, which is a spear unit. I figured he would be safer there than in a noble horse, and probably easier to make him cost effective there. Barbarian noble spear units are fairly tough. I've got 4 units of Galatian swordsmen, and I just put my extra money in upgrades on these guys to make them sturdier. And then I have 4 Galatian spears, which is kind of a medium spear unit. Not a bad one. Capable against cavalry, decent in rear charges or an infantry fight. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and split my Galatian Raiders, just to do some scouting. So I'm going to scout around and make sure my opponent hasn't hidden any cavalry. I'm seeing most of his army now, and it looks like it's a fairly complete army, but I want to see what else he has. So getting Thracian warriors here on the flank, some tribal warriors behind his main line, more Thracian warriors on this flank, and then he's got 2 tribal warriors here. So his front line is actually composed partly of tribal warriors and partly of spearmen. And his spearmen is what he's going to send down the center, but he does have tribal warriors behind them. So if I were him, though, I would have definitely put the spears to the rear or the flank against Galatia, because I don't think Galatia really has any units that would be a threat to your swordsmen from the front. And if he sends his spears forward into my infantry, they're going to get killed, certainly. But then maybe he thinks that what he can do is wear down my infantry. So, I mean, that's possible. So I got my javelins turned off, but I did leave skirmish on at this point just in case I had forgotten to control one of these units. And what I'm really wanting to do, actually, is throw some javelins into the back of this Oathsworn and try and keep him away from the fight. So I decide at this point that my Galatian Raiders are going to focus their attention right here and see what we can do about that Oathsworn. Because that Oathsworn is really my only fear, because it can chop right through my front line. His Celtic slingers are not going to do anything substantial, and I don't really expect mine to either. And so I go ahead and start firing some shots at his Celtic slingers with my own, just to try and tie them down. You can see that my slingers haven't even killed one of his yet. Celtic slingers can't even kill Celtic slingers. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and charge my legionaries and my Galatian swordsmen. I get the charge on his tribal warriors, which is good, because otherwise those are much stronger units than my Galatian swordsmen. But that'll help make it a little more of a fight. And then I'm going to bring my spearmen just to kind of hold those men off my flank. And then look, see, I've already pulled his general from the main engagement with my Galatian Raiders, and he also keeps 2 tribal warriors back here. Now again, his spearmen should be back here, keeping my cav away, and his swordsmen should be up here in this fight, where they could be winning. But because his spearmen are up here, he's losing. And now these sword units, which he badly needs up here, are tied up in the rear. So my Galatian Raiders here are paying off without even getting a kill at this point. Though my opponent does do a nice flanking maneuver here. But I think he actually turns and takes out this spear unit rather than quickly getting behind my Galatian swords, which are actually doing very well against his tribal warriors at the moment. I think they'll lose in the end, but putting up a valiant fight considering the cost difference. Really happy with the way my Galatian swords behaved here. I did use battle rhythm on this one Galatian legionary, which is going to tire it out a bit, but it helped it cut through those spear warriors a little quicker. And then look, his general has his back turned towards my Galatian Raiders, so I see this, and I take my 2 Celtic slingers and start pelting him in the rear with sling fire. And it's not going to do much at first, but it's actually going to start cutting this Oathsworn down. So Celtic slingers getting Oathsworn kills is certainly not what you want against your own men, and you can see that it's actually pretty effective. I've already killed 6 men. So what this is going to effectively do, it's going to force my opponent to turn his general around, or he's going to die right here. And as soon as he turns his general around, I'm going to bring in my cav and start spraying javelins into the back of his general and his other men. I could already be doing this piecemeal, but again, I feel fine about what's going on out here. My opponent's not really getting anything great out here. His tribal warriors and Thracian warriors are actually not doing so hot versus all the units that I have out here. Galatian legionaries fight in formation attack, and I left them in formation attack here just to make sure my guys lasted longer. You can see this Thracian warrior giving way. These tribal warriors, though, are doing a good job. And my opponent is going to start trying to wrap up my flank a little bit over here, and it's going to be a problem for me. But look at his general, down to 89 men. So his Oathsworn doesn't have a single kill, and has lost now a third of its men, basically. And my opponent's having to pour in reinforcements. He brings some tribal warriors in where he was losing in the center. And again, you can see my Galatian legionary is easily mopping up his spear warriors with almost no losses there. And again, now my opponent is forced to bring his general in, so this is great. Now I can use my slingers to try and fire into the flanks of his flanking force and see if I can slow them down. So these two Celtic slingers I thought were going to be worthless have been quite useful, actually. My opponent has a little gap here and he's not paying attention. Now my Galatian raiders are still on skirmish, which is making them not fire, and I realize it here in a second. Don't take them out of skirmish, and I'm going to pitch some javelins into the back of this Oathsworn. Getting hit from the rear with missile fire is definitely a good way to demoralize enemy units, and this is one of the things I like about Galatian raiders is they don't even have to do a rear charge. And you can see here that I killed a lot of Oathsworn with that volley. And so his Oathsworn's just having a hard time doing anything worthwhile. It only has 14 kills and is under half its men. And then again, these tribal warriors, which he badly needs in the fight, are back here chasing my Galatian raiders. He is going to outflank me with some tribal warriors here. This is a dangerous scenario for me. But I can just start pouring slinger fire into their unshielded flank, and I'll actually start getting quite a few kills on them as well. These guys don't have very high attack. They are very defensive. But it's enough. You can see that these are just Galatian swordsmen and their morale is wavering because of being hit from behind. But these tribal warriors, as heavily armored as they are, getting hit from the unshielded flank, they are going to take some pain here. But now my opponent's tribal warriors in the rear are split up. This means I can come back in and throw more javelins, which I decide to throw at his general. So his Oathsworn general is now down to 30 men. So my Galatian raiders here doing a fantastic job. He turns his slingers around, but they're not going to be able to do much to Galatian raiders because they have good shields. So check it out, Oathsworn general wavering here. And then this tribal warrior still chasing my Galatian raiders. So my opponent, although he's successfully wrapping up this flank, he's losing the center. And I can now start wrapping him up with different infantry units. And then my slingers are still back here with plenty of ammo, firing into the flank of his units that are trying to outflank me. And with my noble spear general here, he can take quite a savage beating, and he is taking a savage beating at the moment. But I'm firing into the back of his opponents again here at these tribal warriors, and I'll be able to put them out. And then I've got my slingers firing into the rear of the spear warrior, and it's at this point my opponent admits defeat. So I was slowly going to be able to wrap him up there. So that's two full stack armies. My opponent chose to go with no cavalry, which is a pretty popular choice nowadays online. But as others have pointed out, going all cavalry still runs with its risks. So like all infantry is good, and it can be powerful, but you saw how my opponent just made a few mistakes, like for instance putting his spears up front rather than in the back. That could have made all the difference in the world, because his Oathsworn would have tore through my Galatian legionary, and there's not much I could have done about it. And so I think that he made a few mistakes. Number one, positioning his Oathsworn in the wrong spot. Number two, not having any cavalry at all and not having that mobility meant that he had to leave a bunch of units stationed to try and keep my Galatian raiders at bay. And these guys, although they didn't get a ton of kills, basically they caused the death of this Oathsworn. Now these guys altogether cost far more than that Oathsworn, but they also meant that this tribal warrior couldn't participate in the battle, and there's another tribal warrior that didn't really get to participate in the battle. So when you think about it, you add up the cost of an Oathsworn and a couple of tribal warriors, and these guys keeping them out of battle was totally worth it. My Galatian legionaries taking on those spearmen. You can see they just destroyed the spearmen. This one obviously did pretty well too. Galatian swordsmen, nice performance from these units that were so cheap. They really turned out well for me, and then the Galatian spears also doing a good job. My general was losing where he was at, but you know, in the end that worked out too. He was safe in that unit, and bringing a noble cav wouldn't have done a whole lot for me, I don't think, in this particular scenario. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed that. HeirofCarthage, signing off for now.